Hello, I'm Liz Lumley from Finextra, and we're here at Sibos 2014 in Boston, and I'm speaking to Daniel Szmukler of the Euro Banking Association. Now, the EBA are well known in Europe for being, the cornerstone of thought leadership and a lot of discussion around collaboration. And you guys put together a number of working groups looking at various parts of the industry, including a new one looking at retail payments. Can you talk us through some of the findings of some of these working groups?
Yes, Les, indeed. We have, over the last years, created a number of working groups looking at different areas or subject areas of expertise, among others e-invoicing, supply chain finance, and the latest one that you just referred to is on electronic alternative payments, with a particular focus on the retail payments arena. And that working group has received a mandate by the EBA board to do research in the future trends in the area of retail payments, in particular also in the area of non-bank-led payments. And we have started our work, I believe it was in 2013, and we have recently published a report on the new user requirements for electronic alternative payments, and we're currently drafting a report on infrastructure requirements for electronic alternative payments. So the essence of our first report concluded with challenges that banks have to overcome in positioning an attractive offer towards their retail customers in the space of electronic alternative payments. And our deliberations in the working group started out from a number of assumptions. Assumption number one was that we are witnessing changes in consumer behavior that are dramatically changing the service propositions that banks would need to come up with in the run-up to 2020.
I think outside of regulations, changes in consumer behavior is the biggest topic in banking that I've seen.
Absolutely. We have spent over the last number of years many of our efforts on regulatory compliance. But now I believe after SEPA migration has been successfully implemented, we have time to really focus again all our efforts on our customer, be it the consumer or the corporate customer. And having a customer-centric strategy within the banks is becoming an imperative. And so we have spent a lot of time researching on these new developments in the customer space. And obviously the retail space is also very much dominated by non-bank offers in this space. And so our research was focused also on how can we ensure that the banks stay actively involved in this space, are not disintermediated by non-banks, and how do we ensure as well that their product and channel propositions remain top of mind for the consumers. And much of our work was on figuring out what would be the feature set of future payments, the next generation type of payments that would arise over the next years. So essentially it was research and analysis in the first place, and with, I would say, increasing acceptance of this new reality, we will start communicating to our member banks on proposed strategies how to accommodate for these changes.
So you mentioned earlier in your answer challenges, and you also mentioned sort of the non-bank entrance into this market. So those are basically going to be my next two questions. For EBA members looking at electronic payments or retail payments, what are the biggest challenges that they should look out for?
Well, the first challenge is to recognize across the bank that there is an impact on the service propositions of banks due to the accelerating pace of innovation in the area of electronic alternative payments. So realigning the product propositions is going to be a huge challenge to banks. Banks have operated over a long period of time in the traditional silos, be it the ACH or conventional payment silo as opposed to the card silos. We have come to a point where, in order to deflect the long-term disintermediation of banks by non-banks, we would have to consider breaking some of these silos and thinking about multi-channel integrated service propositions that take the best of breed of the ACH offerings and of the card offerings.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned also, so the non-bank challenges, and when we look at this market, there are the traditional players, the banks, and then there are this new guard, the disruptors, the disintermediators. How is that ecosystem going to stay the same, or how do you see it changing in the future?
Well, you're mentioning a term that's quite interesting, ecosystem. Indeed, it is developing into an ecosystem, meaning that we will have to deal with a number of players that were traditionally not part of the equation. The stakeholders are highly diversified. They come from different backgrounds, and they all take one part of, let's say, the payments value proposition in that ecosystem. Traditionally, we had tried to have a service offering that covers the entire payments value chain. In e-commerce transactions, it's less likely that banks will be able to cover the entire payments journey. We know of a lot of overlay services sitting on top of the bank's infrastructure, interbank infrastructure. We know as well of a number of service propositions by non-banks that close the inconvenience gaps that traditional payment methods have left open because they were never designed to work online for e-commerce transactions. And the challenge to our membership will be to conceive ACH-based products that can actually close this inconvenience gap.
So it seems like there's a lot of change, especially in terms of retail payments going on right at the moment. Is that what we can expect going forward? Just this increasing amount of change.
Absolutely, and the EBA has always in the past years helped its member banks to accommodate for roadmaps, plans, implementation plans, and strategies for complex payments change. That remains one of our core propositions to the membership, and we believe with the flurry of changes that we're going to see in the payments environment over the next years, we will, as EBA, will be well positioned to act as advisor to our banks and to provide orientation and strategic guidance in how to successfully overcome these changes.